we narrow it down to the problems of northern Nigeria. And I told him that for me, I think there are 3 areas of strength in the north, which unfortunately have become a burden. And I told him, one is the population, the second is the land, and the third is religion. And since then, we keep on communicating and sharing ideas. And I want to say that he's an excellent blogger because he writes on current issues which are fundamental. Now, let me start refreshing our minds on the definition and dimensions of poverty. I'm sure this is not new to all of you here, but for the purpose of, refreshing our minds, as you've seen on the slides, the Copenhagen Declaration, which says poverty is a condition characterized by severe deprivation of basic human needs, including food, water, sanitation facilities, health, shelter, education, and information. And also poverty is a multidimensional concept in the sense that it has breadth, the ways people experience it. It has depth in terms of its severity and how extreme it is. And it has duration in terms of the length of time of experience and how long people remain in it. Some people do inherit poverty and they die with it. There are also the types in terms of food poverty, the daily calorie rate recommended, I think about 2,000, 2,500 calories per day. There are people who get far less than that in a day. There's absolute for poverty, those living below the minimum standards in every society. Then there's relative poverty, living below the living standards of the majority in the society. Then, of course, chronic poverty, those living below $1 a day, or $1.25 a day, as the case may be. Poverty is a global problem. There are about 3 billion people on less than $2.5 a day in the world. This is World Bank data. Almost half the total population of the world. I think by now the total population of the world is about 7 billion. 1.4 billion live on less than $1.25 a day. That is below the poverty line. And 320 to 443 million people are in extreme poverty. Hunger is a measure of poverty. And there are 925 million hungry in the world today. Why? According to the Food and Agriculture Organization, it has to do with the neglect of agriculture, the worldwide economic recession, and of course, the significant increase in food prices. 2.6 billion people have no access to adequate sanitation. 885 million people do not have access to clean water. And of course, 40% population in sub-Saharan Africa and South Asia live on less than $1.25 a day. Let's move on to poverty in Africa. Sub-Saharan Africa is the most hit with poverty trap. Out of 76 chronically deprived countries in the world, 40 are in sub-Saharan Africa. 124 to 159 million chronically poor people live in sub-Saharan Africa. Most of these countries are characterized by relatively low GDP per capita, relatively high mortality rate, relatively low life expectancy, undernourishment, and low rates of progress over time. If you check the UNDP Human Development Index of the world, you will get the gist of the story. Poverty in Nigeria. Population living below poverty level increased from 68.7 million to 112.5 million between 2004 and 2010. This is data from National Bureau of Statistics. 66 million people, that is 40.63%, were food poor. 99 million people, 60.5%, were absolutely poor. 112 million were chronically poor. 2010 UNESCO report supports these NBS statistics. 92% lived on less than $2 a day, and 71% live on less than $1 a day in Nigeria. Nigeria ranks among the 20 poorest countries in the world, despite the wealth we have. Narrowing it down, the Northwest has the highest poverty incidence, and the Southwest the lowest. Poverty in the North. As I understand from the topic given to me and from the theme of this conference, the focus is on northern Nigeria. Poverty gap between the North and South was widening, and the very high level of poverty is essentially a northern problem. This is, I'm quoting Professor Soludo, former Syrian governor. And also, the US Undersecretary of State for Africa, Johnny Carson, Ambassador Johnny Carson, observed that Nigerians are hungry for progress and improvement in their lives. Northern Nigerians feel this need most acutely. Life in Nigeria for many is tough, but across the North, life is grim. This is sometimes in April this year, just to reiterate that. The National Bureau of Statistics data put this: food poverty, North 35.79%, the South 33.97%. Absolute poverty, North 61.17%, South 58.36%. Relative poverty, the North 73.83%, South 58.36%. And chronic poverty, the North 66.4%, the South 51.13%. Why poverty in the North? I ask this question when 80% of the arable land in Nigeria is in the North, and 14 of the 17 major dams required for irrigation and hydroelectric power are in the North. When there are huge deposits of mineral resources covering the entire region, when the region is open to the trans-Saharan trade across the Sahel and the Mediterranean to the north, and extended to the West, Central, and East Africa, when 55% of Nigeria's population is in the region, in the north, and there is availability of labor at very low cost. The answer to that question. First, I identify our attitude to education. Poor quality, education quality, generally is a problem in Nigeria, but it's particular in the North. And there's extremely poor attendance in the North. UNESCO 2008 data, 49.75% and 55.79% of children 6 to 17 years in the Northwest and Northeast are out of school. 23.12% north central, 9.44% southeast, 7.55% in southwest, 9.7% south-south, and 25.7% the Federal Capital Territory. Also out of school girls in the northeast and northwest are 66.66% and 59.55% respectively. Education is a major prerequisite for development and a tool for constructing among strong foundation for citizenship. Lack of education is a source of poverty, which triggers inequality and recipe for insecurity. Some of us hide under the cover of religion, to kick education out of our way. But Islamic religion encourages education. And the first revelation of the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam contained in the commandment to read, which speaks volume upon the importance of knowledge in Islam. That is the quotation, which all of you here are aware. Remember also, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, I'm not an expert in Islamic theology, so correct me if I'm wrong. He says, seek knowledge, even if it is far away in China. Don't forget, at that time, the only mode of transport was the camel. How do you go to China from Arabia? This is an emphasis of the importance of knowledge. The language in China was not Arabic, was Chinese. And of course, China was not an Islamic nation. He says it is a duty of every Muslim to seek knowledge. Also, the Prophet, peace of Allah be upon him, said, wisdom is the lost property of the believer. He should take it even if he finds it in the mouth of the mushrik. This shows the significance of knowledge. It is what the pursuit of knowledge that took me to the United States after my service. I left the comfort of my drivers, my orderly, my security, and I went to the United States. I drive myself, I enter the train, I hold my bags, my security aide is here, he's holding my bag now, he's going back to Nigeria and he will leave me with that. So knowledge is very, very important to all of us. Golden Age in Islam witnessed the peak of the contributions of Islamic scholars to secular knowledge in philosophy, science, engineering, medicine, architecture, technology, etc. I give you a few examples. Algebra, from the Arabic word aljabr, was invented by Iraqi mathematician Muhammad ibn Musa in the 9th century. And his compendium book presented the post-systematic solution of linear and quadratic equations, which form the basis of computer programming today. The word chemistry comes from the word alchemy. Like I said, for those who are experts in Islamic history, if I'm wrong, correct me, please. But this information I got through research. The word chemistry comes from the word alchemy, which was derived from the Arabic word alchemia. And the earlier pioneers of chemistry were the medieval Arabs and Persian scholars who introduced precise observation and control experiments into chemistry, and also discovered many chemical substances. examples are there abound of these contributions. So why are we denying ourselves that? And this education, what people call modern education, is not actually modern. I'm sure you would, those who are versed in the Quran, all these things we learn, which we call secular education, are there in the Quran. Next, population explosion. Population can either be an asset or a burden, depending on its quality and use. A 2.5% annual increase. Nigeria's population estimated to hit 300 million by 2050. Muslim population in Nigeria estimated to rise by 54.3% by 2030. Many of us Muslims in the north practice polygamy. There's nothing wrong with that. Resulting in 20 to 40 children with no apparent plans for their education, food, health, clothes, and general welfare of the children. That is why it is wrong. There's a popular saying in Hausa, bakin da Allah ya tsaga baya hana shi abinci. Some people use that to justify why they should have that number of children, but they don't have any plan to take care of them. They don't have plan to train them, tarbiyah, which is very, very important. If you have a child that you don't raise properly, he becomes a burden to you and a burden to the society. And that's what we're seeing. Although food is cheaper in the north than in the south, food poverty is higher in the north due to the lack of capacity of large families to cater for their members. Large chunk of the northern population is in the category of youth. And over 10 million, I understand, are within the Al-Majri system. The northern women who constitute the bulk of the population are denied the opportunity for empowerment as such, do not play any meaningful role in the economic process. I quote the central bank governor, say, why can't we allow our wives to be engaged in trade rather than keeping them as permanent housewives to the detriment of the economy? I don't know if there is anything that says, of course, within limits, that prevents women from economic activities. Next. There is a petition there. No. Back. Neglect of agriculture. The resource costs fever caught the north more than any other region in Nigeria. The north abandoned agriculture while those to cultivate the land migrated to other centers in pursuit of wealth. While agriculture contributes 40% of the GDP and 90% of the non-oil exports, Nigeria imports basic foods like rice, wheat, and fish, worth $8.2 billion a year, dollars, not naira. Food cartel, which includes northern food merchants, have killed agriculture, created mass unemployment, increased poverty, and added to the insecurity. Added to the neglect of agriculture is desertification and desert encroachment. The Sahara Desert moves southward at the rate of 0.6 kilometers per year. The rate of deforestation is 350,000 hectares per year. What are we doing in order to handle this problem? From the south, of course, they have the problem of erosion. Then there is issue of migration from the south and from the north towards the center. And you can imagine the kind of stress put on the resources within the center, resulting in intense competition and conflict over land and water resources. Ethno-religious crisis. Violent ethno-religious crisis conflicts in the north impact on poverty situation in a number of ways, particularly in Kaduna, Borno, Yobe, Kano, and Plateau. It inhibits investments, both local and foreign direct investments. It restricts movement of people, especially during curfews, thereby curtailing trade and commerce. Most of the local people conduct their business in the evenings. When there is curfew, they cannot do it. It creates fear and encourages migration from affected communities, those affecting the availability of skills and services. It leads to destruction of lives and properties, those permanently affecting the economic well-being of families. It jeopardizes relationships and economic activities and increasing poverty incidence. Now let's look at poverty, security, and stability relationship. Is poverty the cause of insecurity in the north? I think this has been, this debate has been ongoing. Bernard Cholet concluded that extreme poverty literally kills in two ways. Directly.
Assalamu alaikum. Can I just make a slight announcement, please? There is some side talk sort of happening amongst ourselves. If we could make it very quiet or go outside and do it and come back, please, that would be very helpful, so we can give justice to the speakers. Jazakallah khair.
Directly, it kills through hunger, malnutrition, and disease. Indirectly, it kills by making poor countries vulnerable to domestic upheaval and war, and by generating transnational threats that endanger regional and international security. That poverty-security nexus constitutes a tangled web with overlapping threats of intervening variables and strands of reverse causality, and that poverty and violence reinforce one another. Sudan Rice, who is the permanent United States permanent mission at the UN, while explaining the implications of poverty to global security, made a case that poverty breeds insecurity by undermining the capacity of states to deliver basic physical security, legitimate governance, economic growth, and social welfare. Now, back to our question. Is poverty the cause of insecurity in the North? If poverty explains insecurity in the North, then the South should experience less of insecurity problem, since there is less poverty. But the reality is that there is no less incidence of insecurity in the South than there is in the North. While, for instance, the issue of insecurity in the Northeast, with the issue of Boko Haram, MEND, MASOB, OPC have been pursuing same separatist and discontent agenda in the South. Likewise, there are millions of poor people in Nigeria who are law-abiding, who are contented. So it's not just the issue of poverty. Therefore, other than poverty, other factors contribute to the rising insecurity in Nigeria, and the North in particular. So what are these factors? Poor governance. I'm happy the last speaker dealt with it from the perspective of Islam. Poor governance is at the roots of insecurity in Nigeria. The 2011 UNDP Human Development Index ranks Nigeria 156th out of 187 countries rated, with 0% of the population having access to hospital drugs. Infant mortality of 74.36 per 1,000 live births. Maternal mortality of 840 per 100,000 live births. And life expectancy of 51 years. Nigeria, like I said earlier, is among the 20 poorest countries in the world, yet rich in oil and other resources. Secondly, corruption. On a scale of 1 to 10, the 2010 Corruption Perception Index of Transparency International rated Nigeria 2.4, and the 134th out of 178 countries rated. Corruption in Nigeria is pervasive and a major source of insecurity in Nigeria because it undermines the constitutional rights of human dignity, equality, and freedom. It endangers the stability and security through its impact on institutions and values of democracy. Unemployment. As the saying goes, an idle mind is the devil's workshop. The high unemployment rate in Nigeria is a major concern. The National Bureau of Statistics data shows the rate at 29.3% in 2011, but particularly worrisome for Yobe, 60.7%, and Kano, 67%, a contradiction of an economy that is growing at the rate of 7%. Recent advert for employment of 100 truck drivers by Dangote revealed the extent of the problem when 13,000 applicants applied. 6 PhD holders, 704 with master's degree, 8,460 with bachelor's degree, and 3,830 with school certificate. Likewise, when INEC recently advertised for 1,500 vacancies, 800,000 applicants applied, including PhD holders. According to National Bureau of Statistics data, the total number of unemployed youth in Nigeria stands at 67 million. Proliferation of small arms and light weapons. The 2003 Small Arms Survey estimated 1 to 3 million small arms and light weapons in circulation in Nigeria, majority of which were smuggled into the country through its porous borders. We have about 1,500 identified routes, border routes in Nigeria. Only 84 are manned. So you can imagine. Although these weapons do not cause conflicts, they trigger, drive, and facilitate them. Drug abuse. The availability and abuse of illicit drugs have similar effects as weapons. The area boys of Lagos, the Enkalare of Bauchi, the Egbeshu of Rivers, Bakassi boys of Abia, Ekomog of Maiduguri, militants of Niger Delta, all rely on combination of weapons and drugs for violent behavior, which disrupt economic activities to further worsen the poverty situation. Next. No. I think you are jumping. Okay. Next. Poverty alleviation. Several attempts have been made in the past by various governments with very little impact. Reason. According to the current Minister of National Planning, there is lack of political will, strategically sound and articulated policies. So this issue of leadership comes to mind. It's a leadership problem. If you have leadership that has no focus, if you have leadership that is not well informed, if you have leadership that is not knowledge-based, then you have problem. So whatever programs you have cannot be implemented properly. To alleviate poverty, Northern Nigeria should refer to the UNDP, 1994 UNDP definition of human security. are safety from such chronic threats as hunger, disease, and repression, and protection from sudden and hurtful disruptions in the patterns of daily lives, whether in homes, jobs, or communities. And also, we should look at the UN Millennium Development Goals, as shown there. The Southwest and Southeast and South-South have been developing blueprints, economic blueprints. And I think it is high time that the North took a bold step in order to come out with such blueprint. From the statistics I presented, which are scary, I believe everybody understands as to why there is a linkage between poverty and insecurity. And of course, there are many other factors that do contribute to this insecurity. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I don't have much time to explain further, but I want to thank you once more for inviting me for this gathering.